I am a big believer in faith. I believe that all the things I've achieved so far could have been critical what ifs. It all began one day when I received a pamphlet for abacus and mental arithmetic classes. As a 7-year-old, even at that time, I knew that numbers were not the most exciting thing on the planet because really, every kid would just much rather run on the playground rather than having to crunch digits. And I'm sure we can all relate to that. Miraculously, what shocks me until this day was the fact that I was the one who was eager to attend the classes and I was the one who persuaded my parents to enroll me. Naturally, everything was smooth sailing in the beginning. I had a really fun teacher conducting the classes. However, later did I know that the real challenge was just about to begin. Because honestly, the only motivation I had to go for classes every week was for the free candies my teacher would hand out at the end of the class every week. And months later, my friends really started to progress in their lessons. They started to understand why I wasn't learning anything because I was just there for the free treats. And at this point, I wanted to quit because all I was doing, since I was so desperate, I would just fill in the worksheets randomly just to impress my peers and my teachers with my speedy calculations when in reality, I got nothing right. And so to put into perspective, I was studying abacus and mental arithmetic, whereby the abacus is an ancient tool used for calculations, especially back in the days when a calculator may have not even existed. While mental arithmetic is the ability to calculate mentally without the help or the aid of a calculator. And so I wanted to quit, but my father forbade me from quitting, which is something surprising because he's the kind of person who only wants you to do something if you're passionate about it. But he told me, no, just keep going. And to make matters even worse, my teacher at the time registered me, enrolled me for an international competition. Now, keep in mind, once again, ladies and gentlemen, that all I understood was free candies were handed out at the end of classes every week. I did not understand my lessons, and here I was about to go for an international competition to compete with some of the world's best students. And so that knowledge made me started to work even harder to understand and to catch up with the lessons. And so I practiced every day, and at one point I was so sure that I could win. But on the day of the competition, when I looked at the trophies and the medals and other students and their last minute practicing, I was so sure that I was going to lose. But that is a lesson I learned, that is to never doubt yourself and to just give it a shot, because I somehow became the runner-up of the competition. And it was my first international competition, and it was on that day I knew that if you really pushed yourself and if you really go for it, you can achieve what you want. And so I started putting in more work. I went for another learning center. I switched, and so I kept practicing. But every year I would come as the runner-up. I was always winning second place, never first, because I had another friend who was just a few. Well, he's usually just 2 or 3 questions ahead of me, and so I made it my life goal to beat him and to become champion. And so at the age of 10, I did become champion. It was the first time winning first place for me in an abacus competition, but it came at a cost because I was really pressuring myself, practicing for hours and hours every day, finishing multiples of books every day. And so I was, few months after that, after winning the competition, I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS for short, a syndrome in which my own immune system attacked my nerves, and so I went into paralysis. I couldn't walk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't even stand still. All I could do was lie in bed. And so the neurologist suggested that one reason this could have happened was the amount of stress and pressure I was putting myself to practice for the competitions. And so I became very devastated when he told me, my neurologist, to take a rest and to not go for classes until you fully recover. And I was disheartened. But another lesson I learned here is that no matter how disheartened we feel, we must never give up, even if all odds are against our favor. Because a year and a half later, I was allowed to continue, and after such a long gap, I was back. But the routine was the same again. I was just practicing and aiming for competitions. And so at one point, I decided to stop going for classes and to practice on my own, to go at my own pace. But I felt a sense of emptiness because there was no competition anymore. I had no incentive to practice. But I am a believer, and I think we should all believe that if one door closes, another opens, for sure. And so one day while I was watching TV in the evening, and an opportunity presented itself to me, the commercial for Asia's Got Talent Season 3, open auditions. And memories came back to me when I was 11, when the first ever season of Asia's Got Talent came out. I was just imagining myself being on that stage, being able to compete with some of the best talents around the world. And this was just imagining. And when season 2 came out in 2017, when I was 13, I told myself that if there was ever going to be a season 3, because at that time I didn't know, but if there was ever going to be a season 3, I was going to go and audition regardless of the outcome. And so finally the opportunity presented it presented itself to me in 2018. And so I made the decision was made, I was going to go and audition. But prior to the auditions, I had to face a mental challenge, I would say. Because the mind is a suggestion engine, and my mind very clearly suggested to me that numbers are not deemed entertaining at all. Because really, it's a stage made for magicians and dancers and singers, and here I was trying to go about performing math on stage. It's not something that you would come about every day, right? And so I was doubting myself. A part of me was really optimistic about trying out. A part of me was thinking of ways I would make a fool out of myself. I asked the opinions of my friends and family members, and while most of them were on board, some of them were genuinely worried about me with the decision I was trying to make, and I don't blame them because I myself was skeptical. But I thought life has no rewind button. I cannot go back, and I can only regret if I don't do it. So I thought, let's just not think about what's going to happen, but to at least just give it a shot and not regret not trying. It's better to try and fail rather than failing to try, I would say. And so I went for the auditions, and I could see dancers practicing their choreography, singers warming up with their vocals, magicians shuffling the cards, and then there was me just clicking the buttons on a calculator just to look cool. And there were so many of them, and I was called up to audition with the producers, and this is the stage before to choose the participants to go for the actual show, which is aired on TV, as you all may know from the YouTube videos. And so I showed my act, I did my act to the producers. They were impressed, and they told me that the result will be out a month later or two. And so I lived every day during that time thinking what the result was going to be. And so one day my dad came back, and he extended his hand, and he said, "Congratulations," out of the blue. And I was surprised, and he told me, "You're selected for the show." And it was a surreal feeling for me at that time, because one of my many wild childhood dreams was about to come true. And so fast forward to September 2018, I was at the Pinewood Iskandar studio in Johor, where the show is shot. And prior to the actual going on stage, they did a lot of interviews with me backstage, and there were so many other acts, and I couldn't even get past the interviews. I was shaking, and I couldn't answer the questions properly, and I was thinking to myself, if I couldn't even do the interview, how am I supposed to go on the actual stage and do my act? And prior to going on stage, I was shaking like a leaf. The producers were telling me, "Relax, nothing's going to happen, just chill." Right? But I really couldn't. And when my name was called, I froze. I couldn't even move. The host had to slightly nudge me, which is something you don't see. This was an ad. And so after the nudge, I came back to my senses, and I went on center stage. And I was just praying, telling myself nothing should go wrong. Everything should just be right. And so I did my act, and it was much better than I expected. I got 3 yeses from the judges. It was such a surreal feeling, because being able to see the judges table, the buzzers, the golden buzzers, the crosses, being able to see it with my eyes in real life after seeing it on TV for so many years, I manifested my imaginations into a reality, and it was a really special feeling that till this day I will never forget. And what shocked me the most was I was selected for the semi-finals, because I thought my journey was just going to end at the judges' auditions. The semi-finals were exciting, and so the final stage would be the grand finals. Now, statistically speaking, out of tens of thousands of acts, only 9 acts are selected to go on to the grand finals. And so at this point, I thought it would be impossible to breach the unbreachable. But when the host flew from Singapore all the way to my doorstep in Cheras just to tell me that I was selected for the grand finals, which participants are selected through Google votes, voting on Google. It was at that point I realized that we must never doubt ourselves. I am here today because of the risk I took. I didn't want to regret not trying, and so I just gave it a shot. And my message is to never doubt yourself. If you want to do something, just go for it, regardless of the outcome. I believe you should at least try. And so I did that, and I went for the grand finals, which was by far the best stage of the show, because it was an amazing act. Everyone had an amazing act. I had a Matrix team act, and it was really cool to actually see myself being able to do math in a very interesting way on stage. I guess it's something really new, and so I made it into a form of entertainment, and to do it at the Mastercard Theatres, Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, the finals in front of thousands of people, it was amazing, and I'm so glad I did it. And so Eric Chen, the magician from Taiwan, won, and I was happy because he put on an amazing act, or every act did their best on stage, and it was an amazing feeling. What I'm trying to say here, ladies and gentlemen, is that if I can go from imagining being on the show for years to actually being on the show, if I could imagine myself publishing a book to actually publishing one a few years later, and to imagine myself giving a TED talk to actually giving an actual TED talk today instead of giving an imaginary one to myself, all I'm trying to say is that every single one of us, if we want to do something, if we want to achieve something, achieve a goal, regardless of what it is or the magnitude, we can unquestionably and undoubtedly breach the unbreachable. I'm Yaashwin Sarawanan. Thank you all so much.